What's up YouTube, Dave here from Zephyr Wargames, bringing you, as you can see before you, Windwitch Artifact Eidolons, or as they're known in TCG, Invoked. Now, this is a deck that's is expected to be rivaling zoos, maybe not as effectively as you'd want them to because they main their kaijus, but with the element of invokes, they can kind of disrupt your opponent's plays quite a lot, especially this guy right here, Rigid. So I'm going to crack straight through it, I'm going to walk you through it, talk you through it, and we'll just go play it by ear. Right, so this deck builds is a little bit different. Obviously I did do a Windwitch Speed Droid build for you, and there's some questionable parts in this deck which when we get to we'll talk about, and I'll explain why they're in the deck. So we play triple Windwitch Ice Bell. This is your 1-card crystal, indestructible Crystal Wing. Must-have card, very, very good. Double Windwitch Glass Bell. Now I've taken one out just to kind of slow the engine, or not slow the engine down, but put the engine at its minimal, what I believe is its minimal level, to boost into these plays. And then 2 Windwitch Snowbell, and you can take this down to 1 if you want. I quite like having it at 2 because you can use it multiple times. So I mean, if you get a Crystal Wing on board, you can then, if you wanted to, get your Invoked into a level 6 Synchro, your Stardust Warrior for that extra draw if you absolutely have to, or it just helps you make some extra plays. Then we go on to the Invokers, or the Invoked. We play triple Alistair the Invoker. Now this card is amazing. You basically, during either player's turn, you send this card from your hand to the graveyard. Target 1 fusion monster you control, it gains 1000 attack and defense until the end of this turn. If this card is normal summoned or flip face up, you can add 1 invocation from your deck to your hand. So the invocation is your polymerization card, fusion card. Now the next engine, which not many people are playing, and I'm not 100% sure on it, I'm at about like 90% because I just really, really like it, is a small symphonic warrior engine, which is 3 guitar and 2 mics. Now the reason I'm playing this is A, for the extra normal summon, B, because they're wind, and C, because obviously I can use symphonic warrior to get into my Stardust Warrior. Plus, it then, because Alistair's effect isn't once per turn, you can end up with 2 Rigids on board plus a Crystal Wing, an indestructible Crystal Wing, or you can end up with a Rigid and then another Invoker per se. Next up, the Artifact engines. This is where it gets a bit muddy because there's 4 engines in this deck, which is crazy. I have tested out quite a lot, and the Symphonic Warriors is probably the engine you'd go, look, I've got 5 better cards that I'd rather put somewhere, I'll take those out. I mean, you could put a Terratop engine if you want, but that's only going to get you into like Totem Birds, Break Swords, and that's kind of like your main targets of that. But I'm testing out the Symphonic Warriors. We'll see where it goes. These are probably like your link that will come out. So you play the 1 more attack because that's all you can play. You play the 1 Beagle Tech. Now you can take this one out if you want to because it's not used as much because you're basically just there to try and pop your own. Like you need this destroyed to then unlock another one. So you get your 2 level 5s on board, but it's not as clinical in this day and age. Next up is 2 Scythe. Now I am tempted to put this up to 3. Now there's a bit of back row hate, like people are going to be twin twistering, and the best thing about having artifacts in your back row is it makes your opponent more scared and more concerned about popping your back, which is very, very nice because I mean then they might get too scared to pop it, like, oh, it's an artifact, and leave you with a strike or warning on board, and you just go buff, you ain't playing. So it's very, very nice, but sometimes it means that these guys will just sit in your back row not being destroyed if you don't have responses to their effects. Double Maxi because it works with also the light also helps with the Invoke extra deck, and Maxi obviously because it's probably really, really strong in this format, incredibly strong, but it also works incredibly well to get into your big beta vanilla Invoked, so I'll show you that when we get to it. Now there were some suggestions from some people before, which is absolutely fine, about playing Master Restrict in the deck, which I completely get. So you play Maxi just so your opponent can't kaiju your indestructible Crystal Wing. And yes, I mean the ability to Master Restrict, lock your opponent out, stop them kaijuing you is insane because then they can't do anything. Like there's very, very, very few cards that can get around a Crystal Wing without having its effects negated and destroyed by Crystal Wing himself. So that's it for the monster lineup. Next up is the spell lineup. So you play triple magical meltdown. Now this is the field spell for the invoked. Basically, when this card is activated, you add one Alistair the Invoker from your deck to your hand. The activation of your cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated. Also, your opponent's cards and effects cannot activate when a monster is fusion summoned this way. You can only activate one of these per turn. So he's your searcher and then he's your protector, so your opponent can't warn in you. So it then means that they can't like TT you on the summon, they can't bottomless you on your summon or anything like that. So it's a complete protection, which is why you then follow up by free terraforming, because you want to see it as best as possible. And the field spell are never dead, because I mean you just replace it to search out another Alistair, and Alistair has a really nice bounce back effect with the fusion card, which is coming up next. Your terraformings are the only cards that will turn dead, but then you can always set them as your extra bluff for your artifacts. So, Invocation, the fusion spell. Fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand as fusion materials. If summoning an invoked fusion monster this way, you can also banish monsters from the field and or either player's graveyard as fusion materials. If this card is in your graveyard, you can target one of your banished Alistair the Invoker, shuffle this card into your deck, and if you do, add that card from your deck, Alistair, the Alistair you've targeted, to your hand. You can only use the effect of Invocation once per turn. So it's a very, very nice fusion card. It lets you recycle your Alistair, so you can still drop the Alistair for the attack boost. Also, the fact that you get to banish from your opponent's graveyard is beautiful. So just so it's clear, when it says you can also banish monsters from your field and or either player's graveyard, so it's only the graveyard that you can banish from your opponent. But then obviously you're banishing your Alistair, you banish whatever material. Obviously in this deck you've got more lights, you're going into Rigid, and then going from there. Double Twin Twisters, because back row hate. Dark Hole. Now the reason I play Dark Hole, not Rigeki, is because there are sometimes when I want to clear my board so that my ice spell is then free to go off. This isn't a necessary, you can take this out if you want to, but I just feel Dark Hole is a very, very nice card at this moment in time, especially for this deck. We then play triple Artifact Sanctum. Now, I picked these cards up 15 quid, but that was ages and ages ago for a hat deck. It's ridiculous price at the moment, like stupid. It's nowhere near that value, but hey ho. Special summon one artifact monster from your deck. You can only activate one Artifact Sanctum per turn. You cannot conduct the battle phase the turn you activate this card, but you usually activate it during your opponent's turn anyway. If this card is in its owner's possession, is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can target one card on the field and destroy it. This is here to disrupt your opponent's plays. So this is another one. With your Artifact Sanctums, your barriers, your strikes, and your warnings, and your vanities, your opponent is scared of popping your back row. Whereas if you're hitting a Sanctum, you bring out your Scythe, which is why I'm tempted to bump Scythe up to 3. You basically say to Zeus, no. No, sit down. You're not doing anything. Locks them out of their extra deck completely. And that's why Sanctum is such a strong card, and which is why it's so expensive at this moment in time. But, you know, neither here nor there. Double Barrier, one of the strongest traps in the game. I side the third one in. Double Strike, can either take this down to 1 if you want to, and 1 warning, and then 1 vanities, while we can still use it and get away with it. I mean, you saw how good it was in the YCS final and how much of a change it made to the game. Right, now on to the extra deck. Now, as I'm going through this, I'll kind of explain what each one does. So I would, if I need to get a second one of the Rigid, so I would play 2 of that. At the moment, I've got the Pallades in there at this moment in time because of the Beagle tech. But, you know, this will probably definitely be a second invoked Rigid. Because basically, he is a Book of Moon. So it's Alistair the Invoker plus 1 wind monster. So your whole deck is wind and you're locked into winds when you use Ice Spell's effect. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you target 1 face-up monster on the field, change it to face-down defense position. He is a continual Book of Moon during either player's turn, which is amazing because it disrupts plays. Next up, I'll play 1 invoked Mechaba. Once per turn, during either player's turn, when a spell, trap, card, or monster effect is activated, you can send the same type of card, monster, spell, or trap from your hand to the graveyard and negate the activation if you do banish that card. So he's a banishing Ultimate Provenance. Now, your light targets in your deck are your artifacts, but also because you're playing up against your opponent, you can be banishing that as well. Invoked Coitius. Alistar and a water monster cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. This card can attack while in face-up defense position. If it does, apply its attack for damage calculation. So it attacks at 1800 and it's got a 29 booty that's protecting it. Now, you only play it at 1 because you're very, very rarely going to get a water monster, but, you know, toads and Atlanteans and stuff like that. Invoked Purgatorio. Obviously, getting the catch is all their attributes. So Alistar plus a fire monster. This card gains 200 attack for each card your opponent controls. This card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. If this card attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage. Now, you don't have to play this card. You can easily drop this card out as well. But it's just very, very nice to go up against metal foes or stuff like that. Because then if they're using painful decision, stuff like that, they've got targets in grave and you can clear them out. Next up, I played 2 Invoked Magnolicia. It's just a normal vanilla monster. And it's Alistar and 1 Earth monster. So you can use if you've used your Maxes, you can then banish it from your graveyard. Obviously, Zodiacs are a thing, they're all Earth, so you can banish their Ratvias, so they can't cycle them back. And then you're getting a 3k BR plus a 33 defender. And then finally, our Invoked Elysium. So it's one invoked monster plus 1 monster that was special summoned from the extra deck. Must first be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials. While this face-up card on the field, it is also treated as Dark, Earth, Water, Fire, and Wind attribute. Once per turn, during either player's turn, you can target 1 invoked monster you control or in your graveyard. Banish it, and all monsters your opponent controls with the same attribute as that monster. So, if you target your Magnolicia on field or in grave, banish it, your opponent has to banish all monsters they control with the same attribute. By Ratvias, by Fireblades, by Viper, by everything to do with Zodiacs. So it's a very, very good card, which is why it's so hard to get out. But when you do, it's very worth it. Now, the one invoked that I didn't see was the Dark one. And that was the card that only lets each opponent attack with 1 monster and only activate 1 monster as effect per turn. That's a very, very nice card. It's only 1800 defense. But you set that up against Zodiacs, they're not doing anything. I mean, you know, you'd have to Ratvia into Drancia to pop it and go off from there. But it really, really does slow them down. It means they have to waste their Drancia as well. Next up, 1 Stardust Charge Warrior, because his deck can make 6s quite nicely. It's a wind monster. The extra draw you need is always quite nice. I play 1 Clearwing Synchro Dragon and 1 Windwitch Winterbell for your level 7s. Winterbell purely for the burn. You can bump this up to 2 if you want. And Clearwing, just in case I have to stop at a 7. Clearwing's the better one to stop at rather than Winterbell. Doubling up Crystal Wing, which is why I've got the bigger Windwitch engine. Purely because you can make this guy twice. It's very, very easy to do. And it's such a broken card when it can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Next up, I play the 1 Volcasaurus because it's one of the better level 5, generic level 5s. And then the 1 Artifact Durandal. Now, the Artifact Durandal, just for shuffling my opponent's hands, shuffling my hands if it's a dead hand, and then going from there, really. But that's kind of it. Now, like I said before, I have only got the 1 Invoked Rigid. I would probably put him easily up to 2, if not 3, if I absolutely wanted to. So yeah, that's kind of it for the Windwitch Invoker Should Have Stayed Eidolon. Windwitch Eidolon Invokers deck profile. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. And as always, guys, without taking out the camera, happy dueling. If you like that video, why not check out our other videos available? We've got more deck profiles, pack openings, and of course duels. And don't forget to click on the most important button of all, that subscribe button, right in the bottom left hand corner.